Hi, and welcome everybody. If you're watching, you'll see there are six of us on this joint podcast where we're going to talk about baseball movies, and in particular movies that we really like and we want you to know about from our standpoint as being something that we believe you should be seeing. They may not be the most famous baseball movies, but they might be. And everybody's going to take a turn around talking about their couple of movies, and we hope you'll enjoy that. The time that we're going to take to explain why we love these movies. And I'm going to introduce Vince Wetzel because it was Vince who came to me and said, "Hey, maybe we can do this." Gordon and I had Vince on our podcast where we talked about his book Lose Yourself, which is excellent and should be made into a baseball movie, truly. And we kind of came up with the idea of not doing the Mount Rushmore thing and saying, how about movies that people should maybe take a different look at. We've got a very dark and dreary day here in the New York City area, so if there were a baseball movie day, this might even be it. So I'm going to start with Vince, and then we'll kind of go around. And Vince, you'll introduce yourself and tell us what your first movie is.
Great. Hey, thanks, Mark, and thanks for everybody who's on this call. I think we're going to have a great discussion of all of these great baseball movies. And as you said, I think it's one of those things that whether it's July 4th or Memorial Day or those great opportunities to sit down and watch some baseball movies, I hope that we all come away with something to maybe take a look at again. So I think I'm going to start off with my first baseball movie, and I think it should be a Mount Rushmore movie, but I'll let you guys talk about it. And of course, it's The Sandlot. I think everybody always looks at The Sandlot. Yes, talk about nostalgia. You got kids, and it brings you back to when you were a child and you hung out with your friends all day during the summer. And what did you do? And what did you talk about? And just the stupid little arguments you had, and about what player was better than another player, or no, you'd have no chance with that girl. All of those things, they all come together so beautifully for me. And so every time I watch that, I get the feels of nostalgia. I also think that this movie has the best scene of any baseball movie, and I'll die on this hill. The 4th of July scene, when they gather up they're taking their hot dogs and they go to the park and they have their one night game. The fireworks are going off on the back end. You have Ray Charles singing "America the Beautiful." You have all the kids just being kids and watching the fireworks, except for the one guy, except for Benny the Jet Rodriguez as he's rounding the base on another home run. So that really brings a lot of resonance to me. But there's one thing that I hate about this movie. And one hit. Okay, you have Smalls. He ends up becoming a Dodger broadcaster. And you have this movie where it's not Vince Scully. Vince Scully is alive and well during the filming of this movie. And you have Smalls be the broadcaster? No way. Give Smalls another job. Give him like something else, a sports writer even. Not the broadcaster.
They just picked a different team too? Couldn't they just played for like the Angels instead of the Dodgers?
Exactly. That's the one part every time I see that and he's wearing his stupid fishing hat, I'm going, you do not belong in that space. So anyway, that's my one beef, but outside of that, I love it.
And was Daniel Stern's voice, right? He was the right. I think he was the voice, wasn't he? Underneath?
No, that was Wonder Years.
Oh,
that's another show. There's another nostalgic show. But yes, I think we can move it on to somebody else. That'll be I think have Vince Scully broadcast the game, have him be a sports writer or a general manager even. I wouldn't mind that. Whatever. All right. Anybody other thoughts on The Sandlot?
I have a hot take. I am not a huge Sandlot guy, actually. I think it's like too nostalgic, and I think it kind of glosses over a lot of stuff from this very like narrow perspective, and they kind of like shoehorn in that James Earl Jones scene at the end instead of having like any sort of like meaningful discussion about it. It's just kind of like, oh right, black people existed too, and it's kind of I don't think it's handled very well.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's a fun movie, but yeah,
yeah.
it's not my favorite.
To
Okay.
each their own. All right. Well, since you gave the ant the
The
antithesis
scathing
of
hot
the,
take, yeah, yeah.
that's right. I'm going to go to you next. You get the
All
next
right.
one.
Well, I'm Scott Bolohan. I am founder of the Twin Bill Literary Baseball Journal. We've been going around for 5 years now. We just released our anthology, Early Innings, which is out everywhere now. And our podcast is back for its second season as well, which is all about early innings. We had Joe Burton, real life Sid Finch, on there. He's our cover model, and so we had him on and a bunch of other people who were contributors. But I wanted to start off with my movies. I grew up in Detroit as a Tigers fan, and then I moved to New York, and I now am a Yankee Stadium tour guide. And one movie that really kind of combines the two of those is the movie 61. And if you don't know this, 61 was actually filmed at Old Tiger Stadium. I'm in my little like Tiger Stadium corner here. And I actually have behind me here, I have some seats from Tiger Stadium and I actually have the little gate that led out to the field. And you can see on those, they actually spray painted everything to make it look like old Yankee Stadium. So like that like kind of green color there. And some of the paint is still left on these seats here. It's very, very cool from filming the movie. But I love that movie, especially working as a tour guide there. We spent a lot of time talking about Babe Ruth and Mickey Mantle and Joe DiMaggio, and Roger Maris kind of gets overlooked. And this movie really made me appreciate him as a person and what he was going through. And you got to remember when this movie came out. I think it came out in 2000. This is right after the home run chase, the 98 season, which is, I think, the greatest season in baseball history, which we are now not allowed to talk about. Like, we just don't celebrate that in any way anymore. And every time I watch it, it kind of takes me back to that time and how great that was. And then really you see the interaction between Maris and Mantle, and it makes them seem like real people. And I think that's one thing we also do with these baseball movies and baseball in particular. We kind of take these players and we make them into these gods or these people that are bigger than life, and they have their own troubles. Their hair's falling out from the pressure. It's like it's a really great look at that. I love that movie. I don't think a lot of people have seen it. On the tours, I always we have the jerseys, the home jersey that Maris wore when he broke the record, and we have it in the museum there. And I always tell people, like, if you've never seen 61, this is your homework. You have to go see 61. It'll really help you appreciate all of this in a much better way than I could just do. Like, here's the jersey that Roger Maris hit number 61 in. It really gives you a lot of depth into this sort of now pretty much forgotten part of baseball history. I mean, Judge even passed it now. So it's going to become a footnote over these years. But I really think it's worth remembering. And that movie does a great job of capturing that.
I think the casting of that is spot on. I mean, watching Thomas Jane play Mickey Mantle, sometimes you're just like, wow, that is Mickey Mantle. And then of course Barry Pepper as Maris is. They just look the parts.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of the more factually accurate movies about baseball, I think, as well, which I really appreciate. And it's Billy Crystal directed it, so it's clearly like coming from a place of love for the Yankees and Mantle in particular. Were you gonna jump
And
in
one
there?
of the,
Yeah.
I was gonna say one of the things I will give it to for something I rate pretty highly in a baseball movie is the actual quality of the baseball being played in the movie. Because sometimes you'll watch these movies and what you're seeing on screen doesn't even really like because of the way they're editing it together, it doesn't look like baseball. 61 actually has some pretty good baseball in there, probably because Billy Crystal knows baseball pretty well, so he's gonna make sure it looks proper on screen when you're watching it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I'm a huge fan of it. Everyone should see it if you haven't. Even if you're not a Yankee fan, I think it really speaks to a time and a place in baseball history that we're forgetting now.
Yeah.
So, Scott, are you a Yankee fan or a Tigers fan or a little
We
bit?
can we can talk about this. This is a whole thing. But in the late '90s, my favorite player was on traded to the Yankees, and I followed them over to the Yankees from the Tigers. And every time they came to Detroit, I would get to meet like Bernie Williams and Chuck Knobloch and Scott Brocious and all these guys. And so it's pretty split allegiances there. If they won the World Series, I was going to get a ring last year, so I was very much rooting for them. I was worried they were going to face each other in the playoffs, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I'm kind of glad that didn't happen because that would have been a real tricky situation for me.
Yeah, the emotions can be very tricky under those circumstances. Isn't it funny how we become so aligned with our team? And I always define a real sports fan as someone who, as a grown adult, has cried at the outcome of a game.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kelly,
Yeah.
why don't you take it from there? And of course, you're the Yankee fan, and Molly covers the Dodgers and is a Dodger fan, and so you guys actually did get to meet in the World Series last year, although not personally.
Right. Thank you, Mark. And thank you, Gordon, for having me on this show. And yeah, so I guess with me and Molly, we're like the old evil empire and the current evil empire all meeting today. I am Kelly Franco. I tweet and lecture and write about baseball. I tweet under the handle at 3 Inning Fan. I'm also on Instagram and LinkedIn and all those other things. And I grew up a Yankee fan and married a Mets fan. So Mark very kindly dubbed me the doyen of New York baseball, and that's what I call myself. And by day, I'm an attorney. So, my movie that I picked out for today makes me all of a sudden feel very cliche, but this is it, and this is me, so I'm running with it. Bull Durham. And I've watched it many times. And I like a lot of things about this movie. One of the first things I like are some of the great quotes that are in it. When the manager is like, "This is a simple game. You hit the ball, you catch the ball, you run against the ball," whatever he says. It is, yeah, it has the quotes that have kind of lived on over time. And another one was, "Oh, strikeouts are fascist. You got to pitch to contact. Ground balls are more democratic," which I thought was really funny. And, Gordon just talked about how some scenes in baseball games were very real in 61. Well, I think in Bull Durham, it was kind of like the opposite. One thing I was thinking when I just watched it again, like a month ago to prepare for this pod, was that they obviously did not have a pitch clock when Bull Durham was filmed because these mound visits were so hilariously long. And at one point, they're talking about like what wedding gift to get their friends. And it was just really very amusing to watch this movie made in, I think, 89 or something with today's eyes. But the real thing that I liked about Bull Durham is that honestly, I just found it to be a really sexy movie. And so, I mean, that's the honest truth. I thought there was so much electricity between Kevin Costner and Susan Sarandon, and I found it, just really fun to watch. And gosh, Susan Sarandon, she was like really hot back in the day. And I mean, Kevin Costner is a ridiculous hall pass, so they were really cute together. So yeah, I'm gonna go Bull Durham on you.
And yeah, of course, it was Tim who ended up with Susan Sarandon actually from the movie.
Yeah,
So
that's funny.
Tim Robbins. So you mentioned the mound scene with Robert Wool, and I read Ron Shelton was a director, and he talked about that particular scene. That was totally improvised.
No
So he's
way.
talking about candlesticks make a night. This is Robert Wool just coming up with stuff off that. And of course, if you ever saw his Arliss show years ago, Sports, Robert Wool has just a great sense of timing, comedic, and sports vibe in the first place. But I was really surprised because it didn't seem like it was improvised, and that he could do that just speaks to how talented he was. What a great scene.
I thought it was a great scene. That was really hilarious about the candlesticks.
So okay, Gordon, so we'll keep it moving. Gordon, why don't you go before Molly so that you and I are next to each other since we do that all the time anyway.
Totally good here. I'm Gordon. I'm the one half of the Almost Cooperstown podcast here. We're a weekly releasing podcast that covers both current baseball season and a bunch of historical trends and topics, a lot of times relating to the Hall of Fame. And we all have a couple different movies here to talk about. And so I kind of wanted to have at least one movie I knew everybody had heard about, and then one movie I figured maybe not a lot of people had seen, but I really enjoyed. And that was a movie that came out a while ago, back in 2008, called Sugar. It's a story about a prospect that comes over from the Dominican Republic and plays for what is a fictional single A affiliate, and sort of his experiences in the States coming over as somebody that age. It's actually directed by the couple or the directing team, I mean, that did Captain Marvel. So they went on from this to do a lot of big things. But the same way Mr. Baseball gets talked about as a really representative look of what it was like for an American player to kind of go over to Japan and experience what it was like, not necessarily accurate, but at least something that was there. Sugar is very much the same what it's like for a young Latin player coming over here, and how it can feel like you go over, you were living in the Dominican Republic, and now you're in Iowa playing baseball. Nobody speaks Spanish anywhere around you, and just how much of an experience is and how much that is a part of our game. That's why I think it's a movie a lot of people should see, because it gives you an insight on maybe something you knew was there, but you never really considered what it would be like to be that person.
I have not seen it. Has anybody seen it?
I
Besides
haven't,
Molly, I
but
think Molly has.
Yeah,
That's
it's the
quite
best
interesting.
baseball movie of the last since probably the last 30 years, honestly. It's that good. And I'm not surprised the director was one. It was thought of as being that good from people in Hollywood and from people who follow baseball. So I'm not surprised they went on to do what they're doing now. And honestly, what a great idea for a movie. I remember the first time I ever walked into a locker room I'm a baseball writer and have been since 2005 or six. And the first time I walked into a locker room and noticing that guys were basically divided amongst the English speakers and the non-English speakers. And it wasn't because anyone was like trying to leave anyone out. It was just literally like, who can you communicate with? And that was so eye-opening for me. And I really didn't have an idea growing up as a fan that was just in my own like naivete, I think, and probably American, I don't know, arrogance or something. But it is so difficult for foreign players to come over here. And even if you've ever been to a foreign country where no one speaks the language and you know how hard it is to like figure out how to get a taxi, how to order food, where to get money, like basic stuff, not just, and it's really hard. And it's something that's not talked about enough. So I would recommend that movie for sure. Gordon, good pick.
Thank you.
Um,
I'm interested to see your pick now, because I think we got you up next.
Well, I was gonna say, oh yeah, so if you guys, people don't know me listening, I'm a writer. I worked for ESPN and The Athletic. I wrote a book on the Dodgers called The Best Team Money Can Buy, and now I'm on Substack. My Substack is called The Long Game Newsletter. And my favorite all-time baseball movie is A League of Their Own. But I'd also like to say that was like the late 80s, early 90s was kind of like the golden age of baseball movies. It was just like year after you'd have two or three come out a year. I mean, Rookie of the Year was fantastic. Not just because I was the kid's age, but still it was really charming and sweet. And obviously Bull Durham and Major League and Field of Dreams and all these and Mr. Baseball, they were all like really good movies, and I wish that Hollywood would get back to that. But A League of Their Own was the first movie I was ever allowed to see in the theater without a parent. I was with my friend. I think we were 9 or 10. I don't remember. And I just thought it was so sweet and so great. And to your point, just I think it was Vince, or no, it was Scott who brought up uh, or someone brought up how Billy Crystal, what a big baseball fan he is. Well, Tom Hanks is the same way. And the men who wrote that movie, Lowell Gans and Babaloo Mandel, Lowell Gans is actually my best friend's father. But we weren't friends at the time. We met in college. They're baseball obsessives too. Lowell's a huge Mets fan. So I think when actual baseball obsessives are involved in creating and writing a movie and acting in a movie like Tom Hanks and Lowell Gans, like you're gonna get gold. I just think that movie is uh it touches on I mean, obviously the war, the need that it was based on a true story, the politics, gender politics, race stuff going on, pay gaps, the fact that they were having to wear skirts, and then the fact that they were good and they were ball players, and that people turned out. And I think that we're seeing that, like, not because they were like, at first they were skeptical and they were kind of like, oh, we're gonna go see pretty girls and stuff. And then they were like, these some of these girls can actually play. This is great. And I think we're kind of having that reckoning right now with like the WNBA as well, where it's like, oh, I'm not just like taking my 6-year-old daughter to this. I'm actually like really enjoying the quality of play and the style, and like it doesn't have to be about doing something to be supportive. It could just be like, well, this is good. This is good. And I think that's why I love that movie. It's just a good baseball movie, regardless of it being about men or women or whatever. It was just really funny. Really smart and sensitive and great. So
Do you think Dottie dropped the ball intentionally?
absolutely not.
I
And
do. I think she did. Oh,
so here,
okay.
well, I gotta tell you, so Joe, my friend and mentor Joe Posnanski wrote a book. One of his books, I think it was either Why We Love Baseball.
Yeah, it was
He
that
asked
one.
me
Yeah.
the same question, and I was like, well, let me just text Lowell and ask him because he wrote it. And he's like, I don't know why people keep asking me this. There's no way in hell she dropped the ball on purpose. And I was just like, well, you guys wrote that scene so well that there's room for debate, which actually makes it stronger. It's a sign of like, it's like, good song lyrics. It means something important to one person. It means something totally different to somebody else. And they're both right, you know? Because on the one hand, you have, if she drops it on purpose, that means she wants her sister to feel like a champion after having been second fiddle her whole life, right? Or she didn't want it as much as Kit, or the sister, either way. I don't believe that at all. I just think she got beat. Um, but
And it's the ambiguity of it that made, and Gina Davis, did it, from an acting perspective. By the way, her catching the ball that way was so fundamentally important to that movie. I feel like, because it amazed me when I first saw it, going, wow, to portray it that way, and sort of made it be real for a really good player. Like, okay, no, a normal human doesn't do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
but
now
it just speaks to the writing, the acting, and the directing of that movie, that there's so much up for interpretation. In a non-frustrating like Sopranos ending where everyone's just like, what just happened? But in a way where you can actually debate, and like Scott could be right. I mean, and maybe that's just like, I mean, in a way, like that's an act of love. That's his ultimate act of love. Or just that she was startled that this was happening, and her sister wanted it more. So it's just great movie.
I
and
love
probably the most memorable original song that's going to be in my head for the next 5 days. Thank you.
Oh, the other part about that movie that's so funny is so he and Lowell and his partner they wrote a lot of movies together, The City Slickers and Splash, and a bunch of movies with Billy Crystal and Tom Hanks, and neither one of them will say who came up with the "There's no crying in baseball" line. Um and I actually don't know if they even remember who did, because I've even asked Allie, come on, did your dad write that? Like, and she's like, I don't know. I think they sit together in an office all day long for, 8 hours a day for the last 40 years. They're script doctors, a lot of the stuff they do. And they just came up with it, and they probably thought there was no, I mean, now it's just everywhere. I mean, still you'll see t-shirts when you go to a baseball game that says there's no crying in baseball. So
Unless
it's
you're
just,
Wilmer Flores, by the way.
also that's because of the way that Tom Hanks delivered that as well. And let's not forget, that was Tom Hanks had made a couple of clunkers. He was not at the very top. He would go Forrest Gump and Philadelphia and Saving Private Ryan was just on the horizon, but he made some clunkers. And so that kind of, I feel like that also kind of turned it around for him too. And it just goes to show um, he's passionate about baseball. Like, do your passion projects because it worked.
He made an awful movie called The Money Pit in 1986, which
Yeah.
speaks to your point. That was really bad. I saw that in the preview. Well, how lucky am I? So, all right, I'll go now. And yes, Gordon and I, during the pandemic, were bored, so we started doing a podcast. And now, 285 episodes later, we're still doing it, wondering when are we going to stop? Because at a certain point, you're thinking, okay, we're just doing it, but we have such fun doing it. I think that's why we keep doing it. And I'm doing some writing at Almost Cooperstown, have a Substack as well. So my name's Mark, and my movie is another number movie, not 61, mine is 42. And I think 42 gets forgotten. I think it came out not that long ago, like 2013. And the cast, if you don't remember, Chadwick Boseman played Jackie Robinson. And when I went back and I saw it, it's like, how did I forget that Chadwick Boseman played Jackie Robinson? And he was so perfectly understated in what he did in that movie that he undid the original Jackie Robinson story that came out in 1950 that starred Jackie Robinson. And that was, their attempt at trying to kind of make it this story that it was, and it was so theatrically bad that I really am so happy that they made this movie 42 because of that. Not just because of Chadwick Boseman, because Harrison Ford was brilliant as Branch Rickey. And the scenes that they did, they took some poetic license, and having Lucas Black as Pee Wee Reese come up and put his arm around him and all that stuff. Okay, you get to have political little license when you do that kind of stuff, but it was real, and a lot of the depictions they did were true to life. And getting spiked by Enos Slaughter, which you don't really notice unless you really watch that. That's a big play in baseball history, not just in the movie itself. So I think it's one of those that I think if you saw it and it kind of went past you and you saw it and you forgot about it, go back and watch it again. Even Chris Maloney plays Leo DeRocher, and I just wrote a whole big thing on Leo DeRocher. And yeah, he kind of looks like Leo DeRocher, actually. So I think that was really good. And so, yeah, go back and watch that if you haven't seen it, because it's really worth it. All right. Well, we got through round one and we're moving along nicely. So why don't we go back up, and Vince, you take it again.
Sure. Thanks. I think all of these movies so far, I just want to, as soon as we finish, just to start watching Sugar and League of Their Own and all of this. For my next one, there's a little bit of history on this, and it relates to the book. So that's why I kind of didn't really introduce myself the first time. So I am a writer, a novelist. I wrote Lose Yourself. It's a story of 6 separate stories, all taking place at the final game of the season. One of the main characters is a ball player. He's sitting at 403, and but he decides to play instead of sitting on the number. And so what happens when all this happens? And then there's also stories from all taking place at the same game. You have a vendor who has a gambling problem, and he's got NFL games that he's watching while he's selling lemonade. You have an usher it's his final game before he moves to Sacramento. You have a stepson who's there with his future stepdad, and he's just an awkward situation. You have a sideline reporter who wants to have a gig as a play-by-play announcer, but at the same time, her mom's in crisis. So what is the mindset when you have to be on, but then your mom's calling you with this crisis at the same time? So you have all of these different stories all playing against the backdrop of the game, because we all go to games. We all have a collective experience, but we also have individual experiences within that collective. So how does that interact with each other? So, but this is a 25-year effort of me to write a baseball novel. And it all kind of comes from 1999. I got married that year. When we went to our honeymoon, I brought Man on Spikes by Elliot Asimov, and I brought Shoeless Joe by W.P. Kinsella. And I went, you know what? These are great. The baseball novel, I kind of discovered the baseball novel at this time. And then later that year came out For Love of the Game. And I came away from that movie and went, I want to write baseball novel. I wrote 2 half novels in between that time, and never got it through. And then finally, I got through just a few years ago to make Lose Yourself. So For Love of the Game has like a special kind of inspirational piece for me. So I rewatched it for the first time in years just a few weeks ago. And, it's based on a book by Michael Shara. And I forgot about, the love story in this movie plays a lot deeper than I thought it was. I thought it was just like him mostly at the game, but then the flashbacks to his relationship with Kelly Preston. But then you watch and you go, wow, there is a lot of relationship stuff going on here. A lot of back and forth, a lot about just mortality in an athlete's perspective, like the mortality of their career, looking back at their career and understanding, like, there's at one point you will not be able to play anymore, and how are you going to deal with that, and how is the people around you going to deal with that? And so all of these different things coming together, and in this movie, Vin Scully is the broadcaster in this, and obviously that adds into the authenticity in my mind of some of the baseball scenes, is just his narration of those pieces. So For Love of the Game, a good one, another Kevin Costner movie, baseball movie. So you can do it just a trilogy of those movies, right?
Vince, I don't want to be the romance consultant all of a sudden, but apparently I'm stepping into that role. So I found the romance and For the Love of the Game really not nearly as spicy as the one in Bull Durham.
I would agree. I actually do agree with that. But it was interesting how the dynamics, the relationship dynamics of an athlete with somebody who's not in athletic circles. I thought that was a really good, interesting take on it.
Great. So it's a good movie, and like we could do a whole podcast on Kevin Costner baseball movies, probably.
Yeah.
James Earl Jones, the late James, he also shows up in a lot of baseball movies, even if they're cameos. But and it's not just for the voice. It's like he was in this Bingo Long
Right.
Stars from 50 years ago that I remember watching, and that's a very strange movie in and of itself, but also worth watching. So yeah. But I think For the Love of the Game is probably truer than to baseball than some of the others that he was in. Okay, Scott.
So I still play baseball. I'm 38, and I mean, I had a whole bag of Cracker Jacks at the game today, and I'm struggling after that. So me trying to play baseball it's tough. I had Tommy John to keep playing baseball. I just had labor surgery so I can keep going. I love to play, and I'm gonna try to do it until it's not fun. And so the movie that I'm going to talk about is EFIS. Has anyone seen EFIS? Has anyone else? It just came out like within the last month or so. I saw it in New York maybe 2 weeks ago or so. And it's just a bunch of guys playing a Sandlot game, and it's the last game at the ballpark. They're going to knock it down and put in a school, and it really spoke to me about me and my own impending end of playing baseball. And so much of the movie is unspoken. It actually you watch it and it's kind of like a baseball game. It kind of meanders and it drifts in and out of you're paying attention to one thing and it kind of drifts over to another thing. And it really kind of hit me as like, right, I've never seen a movie that really just kind of celebrates not greatness. They're not great players. None of these are good players. They're all well past their prime trying to play sandlot ball. But everyone's doing it for the love of the game. And it really is this movie that I think too often when we think about baseball, we think about the major leagues. And there's so much more baseball out there in the world that there are so many great stories and so many great things happening there. And this just celebrates all of that. It's certainly worth watching. It could be a little bit shorter, like most baseball games. It could be just a little bit shorter, but it really does show this side of baseball that I think we should really spend more time on and celebrate. I think that the actual playing of baseball is becoming kind of a lost art. I mean, kids don't really I coach high school ball and they train. They don't play baseball. They're all about exit velo and going to these pitching things, and the actual art of playing baseball is kind of lost. So to see something just celebrates the game of baseball, it was so refreshing and such a charming little movie. I do really think that everyone should go see that. I hope you guys do. It's great.
That's great. I wanted to say, I had an experience playing men's senior league baseball a long time ago, and that was so to realize that these guys are playing just because they want to, and it was a bunch of guys, they got together on, first on Sundays playing what we call Ponce de Leon baseball, which is trying to rediscover the fountain of youth in baseball, the Church of Baseball kind of stuff, and guys, had played maybe minor league ball. A couple of guys would be in there. I remember one guy going, "You got to look for the dot on the slider." Now, I hadn't played baseball since little league, and I'm like, I'm afraid. I'm just afraid. The ball's coming. He's coming at a very high velocity, and it's moving in a way I don't like. And one of my friends, Dave, who is approaching 70 years old, has two artificial hips, is still pitching MSBL and goes to the national tournament in Arizona. The point is these guys are playing for the love of the game, and it's all about baseball. The games are fast. They're I don't say clean because there's lots of errors. There's all kinds of stuff going on. But you're right. It's the real baseball, Scott, and I think that's a really good point about how we sometimes forget about that in this training world of just always trying to be better and not just playing the game. Okay.
I don't remember who was next.
Kelly, go.
I think it's Kelly's next. Yeah.
Oh,
Well, Molly and I have the same choice. Well, it was her first choice. It was my second, but League of Their Own. And Molly, I'm glad you went first because you did a much better job on it than I was going to do. Thank you very
I
much.
doubt that, but go.
No, it's true. But I found when I was watching it that, and I don't know if you found this, Molly, but that I was just so into how good the women were at playing and that they were just serious players. And I was almost like envious of it in a way. Like, God, I wish I could do that. And I think that was a really nice comparison you drew with the WNBA now and, with the energy that Caitlin Clark has brought because people are now all of a sudden really into women's basketball. And I hope that, maybe someday that can come to baseball too. But what a great cast there was in that movie. I really liked the way Madonna played her character, and I thought there was Madonna kind of turned so, bad girl for a while in the 80s, and I don't even know what she is now because she probably just got weird. But in that movie, there was almost like an innocence about her. Her name was May, and they used to call her All the Way May, which I thought was just kind of this, little under the radar glance toward, what she did. And there was that one scene where she went to confession and she came out, and then the priest walked out and he like passed out or something. And it was just really amusing. And her and Rosie O'Donnell and Gina Davis. I mean, it was a brilliant cast, really special thing.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is I believe originally Deborah Winger was attached to play the Dottie Hinson role. And I don't know how true this is, but I think she left the project when they signed Madonna because she thought this is going to be not what I signed up for. This is not going to be. She didn't think she was a serious actor, or she thought it was going to be a camp or whatever. She just wasn't thought it was going to go in a different direction, which you can see, right? You're like, what are we doing here? Why are we hiring a pop star where we're trying to really make an authentic baseball movie where with real athletes? And but I can't imagine anyone but Gina Davis in that role. So, everything worked out in the end. Deborah missed out.
Did either of you see the TV the miniseries League of Their Own that came out a couple of years ago?
No, not yet.
I saw a little bit of it. I thought it was good, wasn't it? It was supposed to be good.
I maybe tried a little too hard. Would be what I would say to be messagey and whatnot. But
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. But again, I kind of like anything baseball oriented, so I could see through that kind of stuff. So I thought the performances were good, and it was a definitely darker and different, a look at things that were going on that were not covered in the movie. So I'd recommend that too.
Yeah, I agree though. You don't need to be messagey. I think the message in itself is just that if you've got great quality ball being played, like in the WNBA, right? And you've got great characters, people will turn out. You don't need to shove stuff down people's throats, right? Just make it fun.
I think that was the problem. It just wasn't funny. And that's a hilarious movie. It is so funny. And the TV show just wasn't funny. It just didn't have that fun aspect to it.
It was not funny.
No.
Yeah. People want to watch sports to have a good time. They don't want, I don't know, they don't want to not laugh or not smile.
Agreed. All right, Gordon.
I actually kind of think that's why my second movie kind of ends up working out. And this is a movie I think most people here will have definitely watched in Moneyball. And even though I think this would probably not be the best baseball movie in terms of it doesn't actually have a ton to do with baseball. There is a lot more about Billy Beane and his quest to architect the A's than it is about the actual baseball the Oakland Athletics were playing on the field at that time. But I think unlike a lot of movies, you got to get lucky that you have Aaron Sorkin help rewrite the Michael Lewis book and the dialogue. And there's so many scenes in that movie that are so memorable because of what the actors are saying to each other. And there's a lot of really funny moments in that movie. And I think in terms of communicating what that book was about, I think it actually does do a really good job of being like, this is how this team they didn't figure out how to win the whole thing, but they figured out how to compete against the best teams in the league by looking at a stat in a way nobody else at the time was looking at. And now, literally, not a single one of us can talk about a player without talking about what his OPS is and how well he gets on base. And that was in a large part due to the A's looking and saying, this is something we value that nobody else has valued. So I think that movie does a great job at telling that story. And Brad Pitt and Jonah Hill are both really good in it, too.
Just wish they would have talked to acknowledge Mulder, Zito, and Hudson as a big part of that.
I always found it so strange. They just they don't even mention them existing, basically.
And MVP Miguel Tejada as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, no, but it's Scott Hatteberg. That was the guy that really changed everything. Great story, but he was not the number one reason they won. They did so well that year.
I think it was a bad thing for baseball. It glamorizes ownership not paying players what they're worth and like trying to cut corners. And it's kind of given an excuse to a lot of teams. Like right now, there's probably like 25 teams that don't actually want to win. And I think you can kind of trace it sort of back to Moneyball, and this idea is like, oh well, we're doing Moneyball, we're trying to do it this way, where we're building up with prospects and not spending money on guys because that's not how you actually win. I think it was actually kind of a net bad, so yeah, I don't know. I mean, people love non-baseball fans love this movie, but
this is a great movie to get your non-baseball family into watching a baseball movie.
Yeah, yeah. But I don't know. I think that it's interesting what's come since then, and if you can trace any of that back to the movie, that might be overstating it. But I think there is something there.
Well, I watched the last home game of the A's, of the Oakland A's, and then right afterwards I watched the movie, and it was heartbreaking. It was just it took my bad mood and and though I felt heartwarming, I was still like I was crying at the end not because of the subject of the movie. It was just like the Coliseum. There are no more games going to be played in this dilapidated dump, but it's the last dive bar, right? It was the and that's why Lose Yourself. It celebrates those elements of the old Oakland Coliseum. It's just you just watch that movie and you see just the craziness that team has had to work with and the players have had to endure. And for so long they were, but at some point, just the lack of dollars going into that franchise is ultimately doomed it.
Vince, I was there at I was at the final home games in Oakland. It was a very sad and surreal scene. And and Gordon, I checked they do have vending machines in the A's clubhouse. I checked to see if they charge. They did not, like they did in the movie. But I did see that, and because I thought I think it was David Justice. Somebody got David Justice.
Yep.
Somebody got
David
traded
Justice,
and was like, it's $1. It's like, what? I can't get a Coca-Cola. Like we have to, yeah. So that was they don't. But yeah. I guess it's my turn again. I was debating between Rookie of the Year and Major League, and I'm going Major League because whenever it's on, I have to stop and watch it. It's so funny. It's so smart. The plot of the movie is so good, something that everyone can understand. The evils of capitalism and billionaires or whatever, and trying to sabotage your own team so you can relocate to Miami or whatever. I mean, every sports fan knows that. And the underdogs and all that. I suppose the only unrealistic thing is the Cleveland Guardians are in they were winning anything. But There's so many lines, and so it's just so it's like a documentary in so many ways. Like I can't tell you how many guys I've seen, like Willie Mays Hayes, who like come out of nowhere and then sign a contract, and they come back into spring training next year, like they won't even like look at you because they're so cool now. It's like, come on, like I've known you for like 5 years. Like what, this is not gonna work. And then Charlie Sheen, not being able to coming from the California Penal League and not being able to throw a strike, and it turned out it's because he couldn't see. Like that happens. Last year the Dodgers had to send Kike Hernandez to an eye doctor, and turned out he really couldn't see, and he got glasses like before the playoffs, and then he went crazy. Not just because of the glasses, but because he hits in October. But it's a real thing, and sometimes I want like there's a team right now, I'm not going to say, but they're struggling. Their catcher is struggling to retain information, and I'm like, just test, like maybe he's got vision problems, maybe he's got this. Like it could be simple, fix it like major leagues, like just run these tests and find out if you got visual learners or audio learners or whatever. And yeah, so yes, Major League's awesome. All the actors in that, Corbin Burnson, that his name, not wanting to get hit in the face because of the endorsements. Oh, just like the
Roger
greatest.
Dorn, yeah.
Roger Dorn, and then the affair that happens too. No one wants to talk about it. Sometimes teammates, the wife finding out that her husband was cheating on her, and then her taking revenge by cheating with one of his teammates. It's a thing that happens, guys. So not often, but it does. So that was.
Do you think, Molly, and for everybody, I wrote about a little piece on that movie, going, you couldn't do it in today's world the way they did it then, right? Because they violated so many sensibilities and conventions by doing it, that it has to be in its own period. Because even something like Off the Reservation and stuff like that, when Bob Uecker's saying it, is like, oh wow, when I see it, but they pretty much go around the room and insult everything and everyone.
And themselves. I mean, they make fun of them. I mean, that I forgot about Uecker, and I'm glad you brought that up. Obviously, he's the reason why it's one of the best movies of all time.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. But he's pouring his bourbon, and he's like, I mean, he's having his poor sidekick having to keep him afloat, and it's just, they're all roasting each other. Like, we suck. Remember that scene where the Japanese speaker, they had the subtitles? Like, it's just a
Here's like the super long response, just we
and
suck.
the fans go, we're still shitty, or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. And it just captured the fans being like tortured, and like, why would fans show up when the team sucks and the owner's trying to lose, And of course you always have the faithful who are going to be there no matter what. But it just captured all of it, I think, really well, and really well. So good movie.
Has anyone seen the St. Louis Blues currently have a little Jobu in their locker room, and they've gone on like a 10-game winning streak? They have a little like nameplate for them and everything right now too. It's incredible. Do you have any idea, like in the clubhouse, like what players' favorite movies are? Like, do they ever talk baseball movies, or is it not really a thing?
They do when they get like, when they have those scoreboard features, when they say like, when someone's
Right.
my favorite
Yeah.
movie and all that. There just haven't been. I'm gonna have to check out EFIS. But Hollywood's not, unfortunately, they're not making the mid-budget movies anymore. It's either like the shoestring budget or the Marvel, $200 million budget. They're not making $30 million budget, 40 million. They're not doing that anymore, which I think a lot of these movies were kind of like in the middle class area, right? And so we know it can be done, because how many way more popular baseball movies than any other sport. And I think that's because of the dialogue, right? The amount of time you have to go out and have a funny conversation on the mound, or just the sitting around. You can't really do that in the NBA and basketball, although obviously like Hoosiers and Blue Chips are amazing too, but it's another podcast.
Yes. So I have the last one, I guess. And I don't know if you've seen this movie. I think it's more personal, because when I went and I looked at like the Rotten Tomatoes, I think they gave this movie like 5 or something like that, 5.4. It's a movie called The Scout, and it's from 1994. And Albert Brooks, so I'm a giant Albert Brooks fan, okay, and he is a down and out scout on his last legs in Mexico, and he's got to find somebody or he's going to be fired. He's employed by the Yankees. And he goes to Mexico and he's looking for one player and he sees another guy and they're carrying him in on a chair. And it's Brendan Fraser playing a character named Steve Nebraska, who is a baseball savant who's got huge emotional problems, which we'll find out later in the movie. And so I won't give you, but he throws 104 miles an hour. He hits home runs every time up. And Albert Brooks looks and goes, "I found Kong. I found it." It's like the scout's greatest, accomplishment is finding the player. And, I don't think scouting is anything like that now. So it's definitely a throwback when you think about one person finding a player that nobody else knows about and being able to bring them to, into the major leagues. And it goes out on, and it turns out that, Brendan Fraser is unstable as Steve Nebraska, and they have to hire a psychiatrist to prove that he's sane in Diane Wiest, who does a wonderful job. Not my favorite actor, but she was really good in this role. And there's cameos from George Steinbrenner and Bob Costas in this movie. And basically the highlight of the movie, and I don't think I'll spoil it, when Albert Brooks is, trying to counsel, Steve Nebraska, I think it's okay. And he goes, "Well, look, I'm just a guy making 15%. And Brendan Fraser has never said anything lucid in the entire movie. He looks at him quickly and says, "I thought it was 10." And so that play, and it was very early in Brendan Fraser's career, and it's got an amazing climactic scene. It's a silly movie, but there's a lot of heart in the movie, and the relationship between Al Percolo, Albert Brooks, and Brendan Fraser, Steve Nebraska is really kind of sweet to watch. And if you haven't seen it, I really recommend it. It's worth watching, or worth watching again.
I remember seeing that. I think you mentioned it, Mark, about getting a free pass to go see a movie. I was on a special screening. I was going to school in Southern California, and they gave us free passes to our college. Like, just go. You have to take a survey after, but here, watch this movie. So we went in not knowing anything about it. And I remember that movie, and I did think it was cheesy, but it was kind of, to Molly's point, that $30 million budget movie that was just fun to go to. You were gonna leave just kind of going, "Oh, that was good, that was fun. I enjoyed my 2 hours. I'm not gonna just be all crazy about it, but it's a good 2 hours, and why not?" So, yeah, those are those movies that I think we lose a lot, and that I think our genre, the baseball movie genre, fits right in that space.
And I think, as we all said, right, they're not making them anymore, because we mentioned that spate of movies that came out in the 80s. And they're sprinkled a few here and there and a couple, but really, Trouble with the Curve, which I wouldn't call a great movie, is 2012. 42 is 2013. We even saw Everybody Wants Some, which I thought was a baseball movie. It's not only not a baseball movie, it's a terrible movie. And it's like, to pitch it as a baseball movie or a position, it's like wait a second, this is definitely not about baseball. So they're baseball players. That's about it. And that's the most recent movie I could find, really, aside from Ephes that Scott talked about. That they just don't make him anymore.
They tried it with Million Dollar Arm, with John Hamm, the idea of finding cricket players, which is a good idea for a movie. And there's a kid who's coming up now, Arjun Nimala, who might succeed at having had a cricket background, but it didn't do very well, I don't think, that movie. So, how Hollywood is. It's not a superhero franchise, and
Yeah.
They just need to lose yourself into a movie. That's what it is, right?
Now we know the path they got to take now.
That's right.
Yeah. Or I don't know if Molly, if your book, The Best Team Money Could Buy, could be made into a movie, and if it's cinematic in that way.
Yeah, we tried, but it's just hard. It's really hard to
Nobody
get
wants to do it.
any kind of movie made. It's a miracle. It doesn't matter, even for people, even for like Quentin Tarantino or Ryan Johnson or somebody, it's just really hard to get it done.
And the only thing I'll say to that is I worry about that, because that just isn't, as another sort of indicator that baseball has sort of lost its position, because baseball can't get a movie in it. But when you think about other sports movies, they're not doing it really in football and basketball. And, you made the Challengers movie in tennis. That was a weird movie that was kind of about tennis, but not really. So sports movies in general, I think, on an overview, are sort of dwindling.
They'll come back, but maybe not in this. We'll see. Streamers probably,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
not box office, not movies, cinemas.
Well, any closing thoughts? We tried to keep this into a neat, little package here. I think we've done that. We've got 10 movies that people can kind of take a look at. If we don't have anything, I think we'll maybe plan to do another podcast that sort of gets deeper into one of the areas we talked about today, because I think there's a lot we unpacked that there's still be left to discuss.
Great.
So thanks everybody for joining us. Kelly, Molly, Scott, Vince.
I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was so fun.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
you guys. Nice to meet you all.